The legal voters of the Wyndham Southwest Unified Union School District, comprising the voters of the towns of Brattleboro, Dummerston, Guilford, and Putney, were notified and warned to meet at the BUHS District Number 6 Gymnasium on Wednesday, February 23rd, 2019 at 7 p.m. to conduct the business included in the warning. On February 27th, 2019, the voters passed a motion to adjourn the meeting to a date certain of April 2nd, 2019 at 7 p.m. I now declare the organizational meeting of the Wyndham Southeast Union School District is reconvened at 7:02 p.m. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Welcome to the continuation of the organizational meeting of this new district. The purpose of this meeting is to give the board the powers and duties it needs to conduct its business. You'll be asked to decide whether future votes will proceed by Australian ballot and to consider other questions related to the issues that only the voters can decide. A copy of the warning was available at the table. It's in yellow. The town clerks of your respective towns and or their assistants will serve as ballot tellers and vote counters. Captain Mark Anderson of the Wyndham County Sheriff's Department will serve as our Sergeant at Arms. I'm Steve Brown. I am your elected moderator until we take up the next article. I'd like to make some other introductions. Members of the transitional board from the town of Brattleboro include Kim Price and David Scholes. From BUHS District Number 6, Ricky Davidson and Bob Woodworth. From the town of Dummerston, we have Christina Naylor and Jody Normandew. From the town of Guilford, we have Emily Hartz and Kelly Young. And from Putney, we have Ann Beekman and Jamie Contois. The Swiss Exchange is not here this evening, so there will be no refreshments. So let's try to keep this meeting under 4 or 5 hours. The BCTV production crew is recording this meeting for future viewing. Our sound system is provided by Rich Mayer of Be Heard Sound. Microphone passers this evening are Myra Macy. Where's Myra? Raise your hand, Myra. Thank you, Myra, and Gabe French. The vote on articles from the warning, you must be a registered voter in the towns of Brattleboro, Dummerston, Guilford, Putney, and have passed through the checklist in the gymnasium entrance. I understand there are some non-voters this evening. I understand they're seated on the bleachers. Is that correct? There, your name was checked against the list of legal voters of each town, and you received a voter card that you will show when you wish to speak or to vote from the floor. In the event of a paper ballot, it is requested that there are paper ballots attached to the card, and you'll be given instructions on how to use them if that need arises. Non-residents and residents of the towns who are not registered voters of the towns may not vote, but may be allowed to speak with the approval of 2/3 of the assembly. During a voice vote, we request that non-residents please remain silent. Additionally, you may not raise your hands or stand if a physical count is required. We appreciate your cooperation. Minutes are being recorded for this meeting. All motions, remarks, and discussions should be addressed to the moderator. Anyone wishing to address the assembly or anyone responding to questions from the floor must state his or her full name and speak so that comments may be heard by the entire assembly. And unless there is an objection, I'd ask that all remarks be under 4 minutes. During the February 27th meeting, you adopted Robert's Rules of Order to govern the parliamentary procedures of the organizational meeting and all subsequent annual meetings. We'll now take up Article 3. I'll ask Lyle Holliday to take the podium.
Article 3, to elect the following officers of the district from among the qualified voters of the district, which officers shall assume office upon election and serve for a term of 1 year or until their successors are elected and qualified. A moderator, clerk, and treasurer. Is there a motion? Emily Hartz.
I move that Stephen Brown be nominated to serve as moderator of the Windham Southeast Unified Union School District, that Barbara Nowakowski be nominated to serve as clerk of the district, and that Frank Rucker be nominated to serve as treasurer of the district.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded that Steve Brown be nominated as moderator of the Windham Southeast Unified Union School District, that Barbara Nowakowski be nominated as clerk of the district, and that Frank Rucker be nominated as treasurer of the district. Are there other nominations? Hearing none, I'd like to call for a vote. All in favor of Stephen Brown as moderator, Barbara Nowakowski as clerk, and Frank Rucker as treasurer, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. You have elected Stephen Brown as moderator, Barbara Nowakowski as clerk, and Frank Rucker as treasurer. I'll turn the meeting over to moderator Stephen Brown.
Thank you, Lyle. Article 4. We will now move to Article 4 to determine a date and location for the first annual meeting of the district and all subsequent annual meetings, which shall be not earlier than February 1st and not later than June 1st in each year. Is there a motion?
I move that the annual meeting of the Windham Southeast Unified Union School District be held on the last Thursday in June, this year, the 25th of June, in the Brattleboro Union High School Gymnasium. In future years, the annual meeting shall be held on the third Tuesday in March.
That was David Scholes. Is there a second on the motion? Second. The motion's been seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Are you ready to call the question? Oh, I see one hand in the gray vest. If you could please state your name and your town, please.
I'm Orion Barber from Brattleboro. Unless I misheard, David said, David, would you say again the date you proposed?
Did I say a date?
Yeah.
Yes. This year,
yes.
It would be the last Thursday in June, which would be June 25th.
Okay, and would that, I'm just looking at the warning. So is that for this year only? Because the warning says, and not later than June 1.
Yes, that's for this year only.
Yeah.
And in future years, the annual meeting shall be held on the third Tuesday in March.
Third Tuesday in March. Okay. I think that's better than what it has been, at least BUHS has been. I'm in favor of a little later date than that, just thinking about the weather and the turnout. The BUHS meetings were, in my view, relatively lightly attended, and part of that was it was A, weekday, and B, I think it was in February. And my opinion was that the BUH district ought to have its head examined. So, I'd like to push toward the end of March. Oh, hold on. Second week in April. I'd like to amend that to the second week in April.
So, Mr. Barber, I want to get this correct. You are amending the latter part of the Scholes motion to read the first week in April? Second week in April.
Second week in April for the ongoing date of the meeting.
I would accept that as a friendly amendment.
It's been moved and seconded, and I will read the motion currently as it's been amended or moved to be amended. At the annual meeting of the Windham Southeast Union Unified Union School District be held the last Tuesday in June this year, June 25th, 2019, in the Brattleboro Union High School Gymnasium. In future years, the annual meeting shall be held on the second Tuesday in April. Mr. Barber, did I capture that properly? Okay. It's been moved and seconded for the amendment. Is there any discussion? In the gray.
Fred Brunig, Town of Brattleboro. My understanding of Robert's rules is that there is no such thing as a friendly amendment. Once a motion has been moved and seconded, it belongs to the body. So we would need to vote on that as an amendment. We need to vote on Mr. Barber's suggestion as an amendment to the motion.
So the rules allow the maker of a motion to amend their motion until the moderator has read it back. So I understand your concern, but I'm going to overrule that. Thank you. Any further discussion?
Check your Roberts rules.
In the gray.
Michael Roberts from Guilford. Wondering if Frank Rucker and Lyle Holliday could comment on the budget and hiring implications of having an annual meeting in April rather than in March or any other date. Thanks.
The administration's been interrogated.
So that is correct. Until we have a passed budget, principals cannot move forward with hiring. So the later that this happens, that means the candidate pool, which tends to be fairly slim anyway, will be even slimmer. So in that respect, putting it off will be a burden for principals trying to rehire.
Yeah, I would concur with that. In generally, we do have the key assumptions for building the budget by early February, late January, early February. So we would be able to have I think, a well-considered budget and a tax implication for our electorate to consider, easily within the March timeframe.
So, Mr. Burnick, I want to go back to your concern. The chair's considering the Barber motion as an amendment. So we would vote on the amendment, and then if the amendment is passed, we would then vote on the body. I apologize for that confusion. Any further discussion on the Barber amendment in the blue? Or maybe black, it's hard to see.
Richard Mills, Dummerston. Question for the administration, is there a possibility of that date coinciding with school vacation? Second week in April.
For April 2020, it would not conflict with the April break.
Further discussion on the amendment?
Mary White, Brattleboro. I know you said for this year the meeting would be here at BUHS, but you didn't say location of meetings going forward, and I'm wondering if they would rotate from town to town to make it easier for people who don't live in Brattleboro.
The administration is interrogated if you so choose to be.
My understanding is that if with everything goes forward, the new elected merged board would then set those and make those decisions. That would be a discussion that they would have once they're elected and sworn in. So that would be part of their decision-making process as to whether the meetings rotated or didn't rotate or what have you.
Further discussion Mr. Davis.
Andrew Davis, Brattleboro. I was just wondering if someone could explain a little bit about what would happen every year at the annual meeting. Election of new members, the budget discussion. Could someone just give a quick description of the goals and how that fits in? I'm thinking about town meeting, elections for the towns in March. Just can you flesh that out a little bit for what would be happening at this annual meeting?
That's still to be determined tonight. Typically, the annual meeting would consider the budget, but that's also a possibility of when the members would be elected, depending on what you decide later this evening.
Further discussion on the Barber Amendment.
Ruth Barton from Dummerston. I've lived and voted in this district for many years. I have seen varying dates and times for the high school annual meeting, and I have come to the conclusion that the only way you might possibly increase the attendance would be if you gave away entire bedroom sets to every person who came. We have moved the date of the BUHS annual meeting. We tried moving it to a Saturday. We had less people come than we did when we had it on a Tuesday evening. I don't think that moving it from February or March or whenever to April is going to do a darn thing, even if skiing is all done in April. Thank you.
Further discussion.
I'm not sure if you already answered this. Emily Murphy-Core from Brattleboro. So I'm assuming that some type of election schedule would be set up, but it would probably coincide with our March elections in some way so that voters didn't have to come out multiple times. So if we did have a meeting in April, would it mean that if we elected people in March, these would be then the people who would be on the board and be telling us about the budget? Because it seems like a month and a half, lag time might have newly elected people. So I guess I'd just like somebody to comment on if would be how it would function, or we just wait to be on the board for 2 months.
Administration or board?
Well, as you know, Emily, that's what happens in Brattleboro. The elections are early in March and our town meeting is later on, so it would be. Yeah, if it were in April, it would be 5 weeks instead of 3.
Further discussion. Are you ready to call the question?
Mr. Moderator, and also just to add to that answer to that question, if the new elected board runs similar to the high school board, there would be a rotation of board members. So at voting day in early March, it wouldn't be like you're dealing with all new board members that would have 2.5 weeks or something to learn the budget. There would be some members of the board, because there's the proposal has a rotation of electing people in for a number of years of seats to get a staggered rotation in, so you're not necessarily changing the entire board every single year on voting day in March.
Further discussion. Are you ready to call the question? So we're voting on the primary amendment, the Barber Amendment. I'll read it back, which is that the annual meeting of the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District be held on the last Tuesday in June, this year, June 25th, 2019, in the Brattleboro Union High School Gymnasium. In future years, the annual meeting shall be held on the second Tuesday in April. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Nay. The nays appear to have it. The nays have it. The amendment has failed. We're now back to the main motion. And I'll read back the main motion, which is that the annual meeting of the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District be held on the last Tuesday in June, this year, June 25th, 2019, in the Brattleboro Union High School Gymnasium. In future years, the annual meeting shall be held on the third Tuesday in March. Is there any further discussion now on the main motion?
Mrs. Adams from Putney. I only have one concern about that, and that is that if the roads are bad, if we get a snowstorm or whatever, it would be easier for Brattleboro people to come here than it would be to go from Putney. I know that the last meeting we had, it had started snowing in Putney even before the meeting came, and the trip home was a lot longer than the trip down. So is there any way that can be addressed so that it isn't just Brattleboro looking at what's going on there, but what's going on in the other towns?
The administration's interrogated, if they so choose?
We had a similar situation to that earlier this year. The meeting in February that we did have was actually scheduled at an earlier date, and because of weather, we had to officially convene a meeting to adjourn the meeting, and we did that. So myself, Mr. Woodward, Mr. Brown, and a couple other people, we met actually in the lobby here for 3 minutes, held a meeting, adjourned the meeting immediately to a date later. So I think that the future board would have that ability to do something like that in the future.
Further discussion on the main motion? Are you ready to call the question? I'll read back the motion one more time, that the annual meeting of the Windham Southeast Unified Union School District be held on the last Tuesday in June, this year, June 25th, 2019, in the Brattleboro Union High School Gymnasium. In future years, the annual meeting shall be held on the third Tuesday in March. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. You have passed Article 4. Yes, sir.
Paul Normando from Dummerston. Sometimes dawn comes late in some countries, and I want to refer back to Article 3 if I can, because it says to elect following officers of the district from among the qualified voters in that district. And it is my understanding that Mr. Rucker does not live in the district, and I don't know about Barb, whether she lives in the district or not. So I would like some clarification on whether that was properly done or not. Thank you.
I will let the administration handle that.
Yes, it's a good question. If you look at the statutes, I think it's Title 16, Section 706J. It specifically states that a elected treasurer of the, or an appointed treasurer of the supervisory union can serve as the treasurer of the unified district. So it's a good question, but it is specifically allowed in the statutes.
Article 5 is to determine whether to vote on the district budget and all other public questions by Australian ballot. I understand that Mr. Davidson has a motion.
Yes, Mr. Moderator. I move that the vote of the Windham Southeast Unified Union School District budget and all other public questions be voted by Australian ballot. Mr. Moderator, if there's a second, I would like to make an amendment.
Is there a second on the motion first? Second. It's been moved and seconded that the vote on the Windham Southeast School District budget and all other public questions be voted on Australian ballot. Mr. Davidson.
My amendment would be, I move that the vote of the Windham Southeast Unified Union School District, budget and all other public questions be voted on from the floor.
Is there a second to the motion? Second. It's been moved and seconded. I will read back the motion for the primary amendment, that the vote on the Windham Southeast Unified Union School District budget and all other public questions be voted from the floor. Is there any discussion on the motion or on the amendment first?
Thank you, George Carvel, Brattleboro. Ricky, you beat me to it. I had a similar amendment I was going to make, and I am in favor of voting from the floor, with the exception of election of school board members. I think that this day and age, when it feels to me like government is moving further and further away from us, this Act 46 thing seems to pull it even further away. And it seems to me that doing that then by Australian ballot just takes the whole school thing right out of our hands. We just never would see what's going to happen. I think that if we keep our discussion and our debates and our voting here in front of each other, we'll understand what's going on, and we'll be able to come to good compromises and make good decisions. And I think this is very critical in these next few years going forward with this new district.
Further discussion.
I guess that for me...
If you could please state your name
my
and
name's
town.
Katie Wilson, and I live in Brattleboro. For me, if we move to just voting on the floor, that means that people who work or people who have to take care of kids or those sorts of things don't get a say. It's only people who can attend the meeting. And I just think for such an important thing as school board budgets and what that means for our property taxes and what that means for the kids in our schools, that we need to make greater access rather than less. So that would be my preference.
Tasha Tillman, Guilford. I just want to piggyback exactly on what you just spoke to. Rather than limiting access to this important event, I think that at a time of great change, we could consider the change in the way that we vote. There must be some way that we could digitally vote, that we could, look, this man right here, he's recording us. Hello. It'll exist forever. And we could watch it. I could stream this on my Facebook right now, live, and we could vote digitally. And that would really remove barriers for people that have children, that have mobility issues, that we live in Vermont and it snows and it's mud season. So I just want to open up the possibility that there are other ways that we could do this, not physically in any building.
Further discussion? Yes. Jody Normandale.
I'm not technically savvy, as you can tell. That last comment was very interesting, but I don't believe we're there yet. I have always been against voting without being on the floor. I don't think you hear the discussions. People don't go to the pre-meetings to understand what's going on. They just go and they push a button or they write yes or no. I've seen it happen in other districts around the area where budgets get just voted down willy-nilly without any understanding of it. So I personally are very much in favor of voting from the floor and not having Australian ballot.
Further discussion on the Davidson amendment to the Davidson motion?
I want to support what...
If you could just state your name and town.
I'm sorry, it's Tony Duncan from Brattleboro. I want to support what you were saying, but I think your point is really crucial, both of your points, that we need to make these decisions as accessible to as many people as possible. I think getting more involvement in the community in something that's so vital to the community is extremely important. I do, however, think that having these sort of discussions and having information being brought forth by a number of different people with different views is really important to making decisions that are so impactful on the community. I think the idea about having, especially mothers, people with, families, people with children, people who have challenges in terms of mobility or whatever, should really be seriously addressed, and maybe possibly doing things to make attendance to these meetings more enticing, and the importance of them be made clearer to the community at large.
Further discussion?
Hi, I'm Kate O'Connor from Brattleboro, and I have a really stupid clarifying question. When you're talking Australian ballot, are you talking Australian ballot during the annual meeting where we're all sitting here, or are you talking about Australian ballot meaning it's on each townwide ballot on election day?
The reason why the motion and the amendment were made the way that they were is because by statute related to things that came down, it had to be Australian ballot, but we could amend that. And Australian ballot means on election day, going into the voting booth and voting.
Further discussion on the amendment?
Orion Barber, Brattleboro. I'd like to second the remarks of the members, but sitting up there at the table. I've forgotten your name, I'm sorry. In my long experience at Brattleboro representative town meeting, if you are not at the meeting, there is no opportunity to amend any motion. It's either up or down. And mistakes can get made that way. If you have a lot of minds thinking about this, they're sort of in the frying pan, you might get a better result. I'm sure you all read in the paper, we just had a 13-hour meeting, and we voted amendments down and up and down, and it took a long time. But the result was a lot of good things happened. And this unified district, I think, would be cutting itself off from a profitable debate if it presented all meetings on strictly an up or down basis.
Further discussion on the amendment?
Jody, your point's well taken, but it still doesn't address the problem of parents with kids not being able to be here. So I'm wondering if it's possible to put in to Ricky's motion that childcare and dinner would be provided for every child for their parents, so they could come to the annual meeting.
So the chair is going to rule that motion not germane to the main motion. I'm sorry. Further discussion?
Ruth Barton from Dummerston once again. In the intervening years when I was not living in this district, I had the misfortune to live in a district and be on the high school board of a district that voted by Australian ballot for their budget. It was frequently voted down, and that's not pretty, and the reason for that is there is no discussion of the budget whatsoever. People just go in, they look at a number, they say this is too high, and check it off. So it comes down to, do you want quantity or quality of your vote? Thank you.
Further discussion?
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
We have questions over to. You go and then I'll go. Okay.
Hi, Kim Price from Brattleboro. I just wanted to address the child care. I know at the Brattleboro Town meeting, we provided child care for all day long, the 13 hours for those poor children. But I know that's something we at the Brattleboro Town School Boards, when we're able to, we provide child care, and that would be something we would definitely want to have provided for a meeting of the Unified Board. And I know that something we'd have to discuss in terms of limited mobility, people with limited mobility, maybe setting something up where we do a bus or something, and people that need to get here, they reach out and we can work, we have time to work to get that organized so that people can come to these meetings.
I didn't mean to ignore the board members.
Thank you, Emily Hartz, Guilford. I don't think that discussion and Australian ballot have to be mutually exclusive. I wonder how we could think about a way to build in a time for discussion before that vote. I appreciated that clarifying question about the day that we would need to vote, and I wonder if that's clear to everyone and we could restate what the standing plan is for discussion and then a vote, and then we could talk about ideas to make time for both.
I think the administration's being interrogated on that one.
I'm not certain I understood your question, Emily.
Can you restate the standing plan? There will be a special meeting with an opportunity for discussion, and would the vote as it stands be that day?
Yes. However, there are informational meetings that we would hold. And one of the things that has been discussed is that though this annual meeting may not rotate, that the meetings of the merged board would rotate so that there would be meetings held in each town. So people would have more availability to access to go to their local school and be a part of the merged board discussions. So there would be both informational meetings and time at each town.
Further discussion on the amendment? Yes.
My name is Jamie Comtois, and one of the reasons that I recently ran for the school board is because I'm very concerned about each of our schools, which I'd love to see a show of hands of how many people are passionately in love with their school. So this is why I'm here tonight, and it's why I imagine all of us are spending our evening away from our babies and our children. I've done election work for a while. I brought both of my babies to town meeting. I have disrupted meetings. I have missed meetings. But I think what is ahead of us in the coming years, based on what I have read and what I understand about the process that is before us, will require us to be in relationship with each other, will require us to look at each other in the eyes, will require us to invite our friends and our neighbors in our cars to offer to watch each other's children and to identify the voices amongst us that are not being listened to, because it is the only thing that is going to help us survive this in a way that increases our dignity and our care of each other. And so I ask, I like your American Idol #vote idea, by the way, over there in the black t-shirt. Yes. I think we can, I know you didn't say that, but I thought that. I do believe we have to expand participation, and that we have a modern age that allows that. But we don't have Vermont law, as I understand, that allows that yet. So maybe we could work on that next, to allow Vermont law to allow for that. But I do want to say I would like to encourage us to have our budgetary discussions face-to-face in the coming years. And that if we are concerned about participation, As a community organizer, the only way I have seen participation increase, in addition to offering a bedroom set, is by talking to each other, articulating our concerns, and grabbing our 5 closest friends. So that is also an option.
Further discussion on the Davidson amendment to Davidson motion.
George Carville, Brattleboro. I was going to save this for later, but I wanted to thank Lyle. Earlier this week, I was approached by somebody who wanted to know if there was going to be childcare here tonight. I didn't know, and I asked Lyle, and it was short notice, but I'm right, you were able to find a volunteer, and so there is childcare available. Now, that was short notice, and people who might have wanted to use that probably didn't know it. But my point is that I find Lyle and I find the boards very understanding and accepting of the fact that we do need to provide child care, and I am very confident that child care and similar things will be available going forward. And again, Lyle, thank you very much for arranging that.
Further discussion on the amendment.
Emily Murphy-Core, Brattleboro. So just to be clear, so if we vote yes on this, we vote for the budget by Australian ballot. If we vote this down, what happens? We would do the discussion.
So let the, as far as procedure goes, this is a vote. The next vote will be on the amendment. And if the amendment passes, the body will then decide whether to pass the motion as it's been amended, which would change the word Australian ballot with floor. But I'll let the administration handle the question about what happens if you don't pass a measure.
Wait, so the amendment is to vote it from the floor?
Yes.
Okay, so we have both options?
Yes.
Okay, I was just making sure.
Further discussion on the amendment. Are you ready to call the question? So the question is whether to replace the words Australian ballot with floor. If the amendment is adopted, the main motion would read that the vote on the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District budget and all other public questions be voted from the floor. All those in favor of the Davidson amendment, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. You have passed the amendment. The main motion now reads as follows. That the vote on the Wyndham Southeast School District budget and all other public questions be voted from the floor. Is there further discussion now on the main motion? Are you ready to call the question? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. You have passed Article 5. All votes will be taken from the floor. Article 6, to determine whether to elect members of the district board by Australian ballot. I understand Ann Beekman has a motion.
I move that all members of the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School Districts Board be elected by Australian ballot.
It's been moved and seconded that all members of the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District Board be elected by Australian ballot. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Ruth Barton from Dummerston. I'm assuming that this will be on town meeting day, along with all the other elected officials.
Yes.
Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion. Are you ready to call the question? Again, the motion is that all members of the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District Board be elected by Australian ballot. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. You've passed Article 6. Article 7, to determine and approve compensation, if any, to be paid to officers of the district. I understand Kelly Young has a motion.
I move that the officers of the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District not receive compensation for their duties.
Is there a second on the motion? Second. It's been moved and seconded that the officers of the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District not receive compensation for their duties. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion.
Mr. Moderator.
Yes. Ann Beekman.
I've thought about this and I've talked to a lot of my colleagues, and they'd all like to be very noble about their volunteerism. But the money that our elected officials receive means a single mother might be able to run for this board. It's gas money. It's childcare money. Am I on the wrong thing? Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I think this pertains to the moderator, the treasurer, and the secretary. Any further discussion on the motion? David Scholes.
Are we voting on the compensation to be paid for the moderator, clerk, and treasurer?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion on the motion? Are you ready to call the question? Again, the motion is that officers of the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District not receive compensation for their duties. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. You've passed Article 7. Article 8, to determine and approve compensation, if any, to be paid to members of the district board. I understand Michael Roberts has a motion?
I'm not Michael.
Nope. I didn't change that in my notes. Jody Normandou, I apologize.
Jody Normandou, Dummerston. I move that the school directors of the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District receive compensation for their duties.
Is there a second on the motion? It's been moved and seconded that the school directors of the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District receive compensation for their duties. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Are we voting, Fred Brunig, Brattleboro, are we going to hear numbers, or is that a second motion? Second motion.
I was expecting a second motion on that. I believe that was going to be Christina Taylor.
Christina Naylor from Dummerston, Vermont. I move that the school directors of the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District receive compensation of $4,000 per year for their duties, and the chair receives $6,000.
Is there a second? So that is an amendment to the main motion. I just want to make sure I get the numbers right. If you could repeat those, please.
$4,000 for the school directors and $6,000 for the chair.
How many school directors and how many chairs? One chair.
$4,000 for the members, and then, okay. Can we have a total on that? Just 24,000? 34,000, okay. Ms. Taylor, I'm going to read this back. I want to make sure I get this right. It's your motion is to amend the main motion that the school directors of the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District be paid the sum of $4,000, except that the chair of the board will receive an additional $2,000 for a total of $34,000. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there discussion on the motion? David Scholes.
I think it's important for people that are considering running for this board to recognize that it's a very different job than any of the previous school boards. The town of Brattleboro for the past few years has paid our board members $3,000 and $5,000 to the chair for a budget of about $16 million. And the high school board, they get about, I think it was $2,000 for a budget of about $25 million. This is a $56 million budget. 8 people are going to be having to provide the oversight that was previously provided by 28 people. It's very likely, and I would be amazed if leadership councils weren't established pretty much immediately in the process, and each board member would be sitting on one of those councils. We'd have to have people on the finance committee. We already have a diversity committee that's growing in the district, and I think equity and diversity are likely to be combined, and yet another committee. We're going to want to have a group of people looking at the kind of data that we gather and what information it is we want to be able to present about what's happening in our schools, what the students' experiences are during and after they leave our school system. And it's very likely, given the mood in the communities at this point, that there's going to be a pretty significant effort to make restorative justice the climate that we create to manage behavioral and discipline issues in the school district. So I anticipate a lot of work, a lot of new directions, and a lot more time than showing up twice a month at 6 o'clock for basically very little preparation. And to talk about things and make decisions, there's going to be a lot of preparation. It's going to be, I wouldn't be surprised if we were all out, that all the people that ran and were elected would be out at least one night a week, pretty much every week. So it's a different job. I think it's important to recognize what Ann Beekman is going to say, if she didn't, is probably going to say, is that it also makes it possible for people who can use some additional income to actually commit that time. And so I think it's really important to provide compensation that indicates the importance of the work and also recognizes how much more it is than anything that's happened previously.
Jody Normando.
I'm going to talk on the other side. First of all, I'm from Dummerston. We get $500. We're not like Brattleboro or the high school. We don't get a lot of money, and we don't care. We're doing it for volunteer purposes. However, I do understand that this board is going to need more than $500. I disagree with David in a way, because I think this board of 8 members is not going to be able to handle all of the schools and everything that they're accounted for. They are going to have to rely on all the administration. And I do not see them delving into anything. I see maybe the boards, the councils from each board, from each school, delving into the school. I see them going to the meetings. I think it's going to be more like the high school with committee work or whatever. I think $4,000 and $6,000 is too much. I don't know what the answer would be, maybe $3,000 and $5,000, but I have trouble going for that amount of money. I would rather see that money going to the education of the kids. Thank you.
Further discussion. Mr. Agave.
Spoon Agave. I support $4,000. I don't know about 6 for the chair. 5 would do for me there. But 4 for sure, and certainly I'd like to second the argument that what it does is open up the job to, at least here in Brattleboro, at least half the population, which is making under the average household wage in the state. It really makes a difference. I was on the board, and it certainly made a big difference in my life because I live on Social Security, which is about $15,000 a year for me, and a little bit that I can earn here and there. So that $3,000 I got at the time was very, very helpful. And it would be very, very helpful to any person that has a lower income or a lower than average income. What is not a part of this, which is regrettable, is I do wish that we had longer terms, because I think anybody that spends just a year on a board is wasting everybody's time. I don't think that, I'm hoping, I think the proposal was to go to at least 2-year terms, but 3 or 4 would be more adequate. I think school board members should get much more education about education and the jobs that they do so that they can be more effective than they are. But in any case, that's not a part of this. What is a part is that a little bit of extra money to $4,000 for sure for the average member is well worth it and very much needed.
Further discussion?
Robin Morgan, Brattleboro. I just wanted to say that I think that the $4,000 and $6,000 amount seems absolutely appropriate, especially with the increased need for more than a twice-a-month meeting with governing such a large number of schools. And I think that it's essential that this board provide childcare at their meetings, and I hope that they do. But for people like me and Jamie, and I'm sure there's other board members who this applies to, that have very young children, it ain't gonna fly to bring a baby to a meeting that's at 7 p.m. You need to be able to have the extra money to be able to hire a sitter to stay home with your child when they should really be asleep, not dragged out to a very nice childcare at a public meeting. No one is going to be having a successful meeting if that is the case. So I think that this is about access, not just about another important issue of helping people feel that they have the ability to serve by providing a little bit of extra income so they can devote that time. And also, just to address a comment that Spoon made, I believe that these are all going to be 3-year terms once it gets onto a staggered cycle. That's my understanding.
Further discussion on the motion?
Just for information, if the $4,000 a year, if a board member spends 15 hours a month, which I think is a low estimate, that's $22 an hour. And if that person spends 20 hours a month, which sounds closer to accurate, that's $16 an hour, which I think is very low.
Further discussion on the motion?
Eric Findell, Guilford. Just if it's a $56 million budget, $34,000 is a drop in the bucket, especially for a group of people who are providing such an important role for the community and a bridge between the school system and the community. So.
Further discussion?
Lenny Jones, Dummerston. So how are the stipends paid? Is it spread equally among the towns, or is it proportional to how many members are coming from each town? How does the payment work?
I'll let the board or the administration answer that if they so choose.
So the articles call for two representatives from each town. In terms of cost, there is no apportioning to towns for the entire budget because it is a unified budget. I don't want to go too far from the topic, but ultimately, when the budget is considered in was it June 25th? We just set that date. It's the same mechanism that all of our local budgets are assessed in terms of a tax rate to the citizens. It's total budget divided by total students creates a calculation for a tax rate that we all will share.
Ms. Jones, did that answer your question? Okay. Further discussion?
Michael Roberts from Guilford, currently serve on the Guilford board, and I would echo what Robin said. I have a wife who's a teacher, and I can't tell you the amount of times where she said, I'd love to come to that board meeting, and we simply can't afford to pay out for a babysitter. I think the compensation is $4,000 to $6,000 is quite adequate, and I think would entice people, particularly young people with children in the schools, to participate. And I also would just present a question to the administration. Curious if you have a ballpark figure for what we're currently paying across all of the boards, so Guilford, Putney, Brattleboro, and Dummerston, and the BUHS board for compensation for board members to compare to the $34,000 that Christina has proposed, or if that's not possible.
The administration is queried if they can answer it, and if they so choose to be. I'm being told they don't have an answer to that. Any further discussion on the amendment? Yes.
I think if you give us a second, we can answer the question.
There's no objection. Unless there's an objection, we can take a pause.
We can respond in a couple of minutes and let the...
So I think the board will have an answer in a couple of minutes. We'll continue discussion if that's okay with the board and the body.
We could give you a ballpark.
Are you ready now, or do you want a few minutes? So we'll take further discussion.
Hi, Rachel Glickman, formerly of Dummerston, currently of Brattleboro. I just have a point of clarification about compensation for board members, because it's my understanding that if a board member is in a position where they do not want to be compensated, they can donate that back to the school budget. Can someone clarify if that will continue to be the case?
Mr. Rucker, would you like to take that question?
Sure. As an elected official, the compensation is subject to earned income, and it's part of a W-2. But certainly a board member can choose to do what they wish with those funds. My understanding is this doesn't come up very often, but in the past, I believe when this question has come up, does a board member have to accept the compensation? I believe the guidance has been yes, but they certainly can donate or do whatever they wish with that compensation.
Further discussion on the motion or the amendment to the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Chris Chapman, and I live in Brattleboro. I'd like to say that the matter of compensation of a public official has as much to do with respect for the job that the official is doing, and perhaps even has more symbolic value than the value of the compensation itself. I would point out that a former elected member in Brattleboro's town government once said that 4,000 and 6,000, or whatever the formula is way too much. But if you paid people $50,000, it probably wouldn't be enough. So I think that it would be best to pass the motion in the affirmative on this compensation issue, because we're not talking about a lot of compensation for the work involved. The stress, the requirement for a full amount of preparation, a full understanding, a life of learning that has gone into being ready to take on the job. The amount, I think, is merely symbolic, but very important in that symbolic way.
So to answer the question posed a few minutes ago, the total is $52,700. And if you want it broken down by town, I'm going to hand this back to Lyle Holliday. Do you want it broken down by town? No? Okay. Further discussion on the Taylor amendment? Seeing none, are you ready to call the question? So again, the question is the motion that's been made, or the amendment that's been made, that the school directors of the Windham Southeast Unified Union School District be paid the sum of $4,000, except that the chair of the board will receive an additional $2,000 for a total of $34,000. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. You've amended the motion. So the main motion on the floor now is that the school directors of the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District be paid the sum of $4,000, except that the chair of the board will receive an additional $2,000 for a total of $34,000. Is there further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, are you ready to call the question? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. You have passed Article 8. Article 9 is to establish for the payment of any expense, to establish provisions for the payment of any expense incurred by the district before it becomes fully operational on July 1st, 2019, under a voter-approved budget for the fiscal year beginning on that date. I understand Ricky Davidson has a motion.
Actually, Jamie Comtois.
Jamie Comtois. Okay.
Article 9.
Thank you.
I move that the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District comply with the provisions of 16 VSA Section 563, Subdivisions 8 and 9, regarding the payments of expenses and the maintenance of financial accounts, and comply with the policies and procedures of the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union, the previous body regarding such matters.
Is there a second to the motion? It's been moved and seconded that the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District comply with the provisions of 16 VSA Section 563, Subdivisions 8 and 9 regarding the payments of expenses and the maintenance of financial accounts, and comply with the policies and procedures of the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union, the previous body, regarding such matters. Is there any discussion on the motion? David Scholes.
Is there anyone here who can tell us what that statute says and maybe clarify what kinds of things money would be needed for between now and the 1st that couldn't be done under current workforce capacity?
It sounds like the administration's been interrogated, if they so choose. Mr. Rucker?
So the blue document that we have, you've probably seen this, David, the handout at the back of the room has the statute cited, and then generally it refers to rules. The State Board of Education establishes rules in terms of payment systems and accounting systems. It basically says that we'll follow the Governmental Accounting Standards Board rules and the generally accepted accounting principles. So I could get into a little more in detail, but it basically reflects the practices that have been in place in the schools where there's the statute refers to it as a pay order. Often we refer to a warrant with a provision for either a subcommittee to review, or that can be delegated at the board's discretion. And that would be review of the expenditures and then an approval process for disbursement of funds.
Further discussion on Article 9? Seeing none, are you
Moderator?
Ready? Yes.
I just had a question about process to understand why does the article I read have different language than the one that's in the warning? I'm still learning process. It says in 9, it says to establish provisions for payment of any expense incurred by the district before it becomes fully operational July 1, 2019, under a voter-approved budget for the fiscal year beginning on that date. And so the language here is comply regarding the payments of expenses and the maintenance of financial accounts. And I was just trying to understand the different language.
Does the administration want to answer that question?
So my impression is that we would follow the same procedure in preparation for creating the new merged entity that that we're suggesting will ensue in the future period. So essentially, the way I interpret this is it's saying we'll follow the same procedures that exist today for current school district operations as it relates to any expenditure for the new district.
Further discussion in the last row?
Dan Normand of Dummerston. I think the second part of Mr. Skoll's question wasn't answered. He was looking for examples of what costs would be incurred between now and when the district becomes operational. And I would like that plus an explanation of where the funds come from before the district is operational.
I think the administration has been queried again.
So this is somewhat not prescribed in statute, in that for districts that passed a merged budget, there's a $150,000 transition grant that essentially covers any costs related to setting up the merger. In the absence of a voter-approved merger, what we have to go on at this point as administratively and as the school board is a memorandum from the Department of Education. It was dated March 8th, that essentially directed us to assure that a entity is formed and is able to be operated as of July 1st. So we could share that memorandum with you. Unfortunately, we're not getting any additional guidance on how to proceed. I'm sure you're aware that there are a number of pending issues that may change the current law. So we're looking for guidance as well on that question and many others.
Can you give an example on the type? I think the other part of that question. I think part of the question was examples of expenses that may be incurred before July 1st, 2019. Can you answer that, if you can?
Sure. Sure. One of the core tools that has to be in place is an accounting system. And to move forward with that, we need to engage the application developer. Tyler Systems. They're widely used in Vermont. It is the software application that we use now. I'm anticipating that's going to be nearly $20,000 to engage them to create the database, configure the systems to interface with banking and payroll and the HR system, a general ledger, all of those things that need to be done to comply with the various laws that are required of any employer, to hire and compensate folks, make tax deposits, and so on. So there's one example of costs to be incurred.
Further discussion on the motion?
Hi, Junie Pereira, Brattleboro. I was also curious, because of the change and all the different town districts, would the process of putting bids out to vendors and stuff like that, I'm not sure if this is germane to the question or to this article, but do the different towns have different vendors for supplies and stuff like that? Will that have to be solidified, or is that become also a unified, or it goes under bid? I'm not sure if this is the right question, but I was curious of the process for that.
It's a little on the edge, but we'll allow it to be asked.
So there are very specific rules that all schools and all the on WSESU in the state that have to follow when putting out bids, so those would not change. We've tried to consolidate as often as we can the vendors that we use, but the bid process would be the same for each.
Further discussion on Article 9 in the motion that's on the floor? Yes. Jody Normandeau.
I'm still confused. Jamie asked why the articles were different between what she moved and what we're looking at. And I guess I'm still confused about why they're different and which one we're voting on.
The administration is again queried if they so choose.
So the guidance that I have been given by the Agency of Education is that this language in the motion is what complies with the existing law, and it gives the transitional board and the initial board the ability and authority to pay bills, manage accounts that are consistent with the law. It would be used, for example, to pay the costs of warning, holding a vote, and that type of thing is more. So it is different, but what Jamie read is from the statute.
Why aren't we voting on what's from the statute instead of what's here?
Well, the motion on the floor is from the statute.
Yeah, but it's not in the warning, and I guess I understand that there might be similarities, but I was just wondering, are there any technicalities that go along with it or not?
I don't see any more in the guidance. I can send you that. I don't see any more in the guidance. You know what I know.
Further discussion on the motion?
Fred Brunig, Brattleboro. I'm still not sure I heard an answer to Mr. Normandeau's question.
What part of the question?
He said, where is the money going to come from for any expenses that we incur before July 1st? So,
Mr. Rucker.
Yes, another good question we wish we had some very clear guidance on. But in the absence of anything other than this memorandum that we've received from the Agency of Education indicating that they word it strongly recommend that we proceed with all of the operational requirements to function as a public system July 1st, 2019. Our assumption is they are requiring this to come out of the superintendent's office, and it would be under a professional service line item. I believe the budget was approximately $50,000. There are funds that are available in that line item in the supervisory union budget. So at this point, that's what we assume is required by the Agency of Ed.
Further discussion in the last row, or towards the last row?
Just to be clear, Frank, so the answer is that the supervisory union is going to be paying for the expenses of the new union district. Is that correct?
I'm assuming so, unless the board assumes otherwise, or directs us otherwise.
And have they so far? Did they for the last meeting?
Pardon?
Have they been used so far to fund the warning and the mailings for the last meeting?
So I just will allow that last question. I want to make sure we stay on topic on
This is the topic
motion.
of the provisions for payment of any expense incurred by the district, and an expense was incurred for the last transitional board meeting. My question is, did that expense get paid from out of SU funds, and were they budgeted for that purpose?
The administration is interrogated if they so choose.
So the costs that are incurred, as you, I'm sure, know, just BCTV, Oh yes, and the sound system. At this point, I don't believe we've been billed yet, but you know, obviously that will occur soon, I would assume it would be dispersed from that same source that I mentioned, the legal and professional services out of the supervisory union budget.
Further discussion on the motion? Mr. Agave.
Spoon Agave. I'm very confident that the money that will be available, if all the school districts just throw in the amount of money that they would have been normally spending anyway in their own districts into one pot, there'll be quite adequate amount of money to take care of all the business we need to take care of. After a couple of years on the school board and all the critique and questions that I had, one that I never had was any sense of profligacy in the budget and spending. Everybody involved in the schools has always appeared very careful with how we spend money, and it's spent fairly well. There are reserve funds. Every town budget is a little padded. That's how you take care of extra expenses. That's how you build a reserve fund. There are reserve funds. We could run a trifle in the red and make up for it next year, but I don't think that would happen. But I don't feel at all that there need be much concern for the kinds of expenses that we're seeing right now.
Further discussion on the motion? Andy Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Andy Davis, Brattleboro. There's still a lot of pieces in play on this in the legislature, and I'm just wondering if anything, maybe I'm asking Mr. Rucker, is being contemplated setting up between now and July 1st that is not easily unwound or set aside in the case of the delay bill that is being discussed in the legislature that could give us more like a year to work on these systems in a more thoughtful way and even possibly change the structure of what we're building here. Because what we're really talking about tonight is building a new system. And I know we're trying to comply with the law with this limited amount of time. And what we know is we have about $50,000 coming from the supervisory union. Is there anything in being contemplated between now and July 1st that wouldn't be easily set aside or unwound should the situation change?
Mr. Rucker, if you so choose, you've been interrogated.
Yes, I wish that there were ways to defer the engagement of the vendors until the Senate version of the current legislation that's being considered, which puts a decision to the elected board, which we, did we establish that date yet? You know, it's sometime in May. So obviously that's too late for the vendor to turn everything around on the accounting system setup. So that's the single largest expense that I foresee. And unfortunately, we're being told we need to get started on configuring the chart of accounts and setting up all of the modules that need to be connected in order to operate payroll and so on. So we are doing everything we can to defer any other expense until we know. Are we going forward based on the current law, or are we subject to a redirection based on what's being contemplated?
David Scholes.
I think it's really important to not anticipate. In fact, it's very unwise to anticipate anything from the legislature. It's really a bird in the hand situation there. And sometimes you better have two birds in your hand just to make sure they don't take one away after you think it's all done. So I think we have to go ahead and do this. We have to go ahead and develop these systems as Frank described them. My question is, or I have a couple of questions. One is that with Title 16, the statute that was cited, this is I'm very familiar with the statute. I hand it out to my board members pretty much every year. And it's for school boards that are in existence. And the unified board is not yet in existence, and I'm a little bit concerned about us spending money and then finding out that we shouldn't have done it. It wouldn't be the first time the agency gave information that turned out to not, conditions changed, and it turned out to not be the best advice. So I'm wondering, is there a way we can, that we can table this motion and the current supervisory union make the decision, the supervisory union board make the decision on spending in the interim, until we also have a court case that's yet to be resolved, which may further affect this. And I think rather than, I question whether we should do this and whether we need to do this if we can do the same thing under the SU board at this point and still make the progress that we have to make, assuming that, assuming nothing. Right, thanks.
The administration is queried if they so choose. It may help to clarify the purpose of the motion. It's on the floor too.
So we want to keep in mind that this is a prescribed article. It was not one that was crafted by this board or myself, for sure, or the administration. But I believe the purpose of it is to be sure that there is oversight of any disbursement of public funds for any purpose. So I believe that's why it's there. And regarding the source of funds, the type of expenditures, I think this article is trying to authorize the transition board to fulfill their duty per the statutes. The transition board is empowered to have all of the authority of a school board until they're elected, their replacements are elected. So I believe it's a mechanism to allow the transition board to conduct business to meet their obligations.
I understand there's somebody in the stands.
I was wondering, just to
hang on one second, if you could just state your name
beg your
and
pardon,
your town.
Mary McLaughlin, Brattleboro. I'm just curious as to the most recent ruling on this. I read it, and it sounded pretty clear to me that we needed to move forward on this. Regardless of whether there's a delay, I can't articulate the law, the ruling that was made, but I wonder if someone could articulate what the ruling was that pushes us to move forward on this.
The administration is interrogated.
On November 28, we were considered a merged district. Since then, there has been a lawsuit and legislation. At this time, there is more legislation. The judge did not find an emergency injunction, which means at this point, we need to move forward until we have something specific either from the legislature or from the lawsuit that stops us from moving forward.
Further discussion on Article 9.
Sorry.
If you could again state your name.
Yeah. Pardon me. My name is Chris Chapman. I'm from Brattleboro. Let me ask the administration, if I might, or Mr. Moderator, if you would let them know they're interrogated. If this motion does not pass and the legislature does not approve a delay for a year and the lawsuit is not successful in overturning Act 46, and this motion does not pass, then what? Will there be an educational system in place on July 1st or not?
The administration is interrogated. If they so choose.
Yeah, my understanding is that this is giving the board authorization to make payments under a system that is referred to in statute. So if this article does not pass, it does not appear that the board would have a clear authority to spend money. That's the way I see it. The memorandum that we received on March 8th from the Agency of Ed suggested that if there wasn't a path forward as a result of the organization meeting, they would find a way to address this region's ability to provide public education as of July 1st. So they weren't specific about what that would look like, but that was the implication.
Further discussion on Article 9?
This is Jamie Comtois. I was just talking to my colleague on the board in Putney because we just hired our a new nurse. One of our nurses is retiring in Putney, and we hired a new one. And I had recently heard from a friend who was really concerned because I believe per the Agency of Education's recommendations, several of our schools have not passed budgets. And that really puts those schools in a dangerous place. Am I accurate to say that that's a concern of some folks? That it's release of funds for training and hiring? Does that seem appropriate? Yeah. So these are real concerns about taking care of our teachers and making sure that our kids are okay. And I really am concerned about that as well. One of the issues and concerns I have is many of our towns have passed budgets. And one of the things I'm seeing that's happening that feels a little snowbally to me is that we don't have a mechanism in place for review of the costs that we're incurring through the transition. And I could be wrong in this, but it seems like it's because it's a messy process and that we've been given such little guidance in it. And so here we go into the transition, and I get to vote very soon on this, as do many of us. And we're going to get to vote to incur expenses that we haven't had an opportunity to review. And then within the next 2 years, we're going to be asked to look at each other's budgets and make really critical decisions about how we behave with each other, what grades stay, what schools stay, what teachers stay. So I would say that as somebody who really cares, we all raised our hands and said we loved our schools, that we say if we are going to incur costs, Agency of Education, for the transition, we need to be clear about what those costs are. We need to know where that money is going to come from. And when we are told that we need to balance our budgets and reduce our taxpayer expenses down the line, we will remember those costs we incurred because those were what we had to pay to comply, to protect our teachers and our students.
Yes.
I'd just like to remind people that the board does not approve money until they've seen warrants and had a chance to question those warrants, and then they can approve that money or not.
Further discussion on Article 9. Kelly Young.
I hate to jump back to a technicality, but I'm a little stuck on the question of what's in the warning and what was moved. And I'm very inexperienced at this, so it could just be my misunderstanding. But don't we have to give notice to people through the warning of what we're bringing up to them? so that they can then vote? Isn't that the notice to them? And if the wording is different, my question goes to how legitimate is, well, first of all, what would we be voting on? What's listed on this yellow paper or what was read? And second, I'm just concerned about the legitimacy of whether if it's approved and further down, are there any ramifications or is there any concerns about that?
So I see your question as two parts, one directed towards the moderator, and the motion that's been made, that's currently on the floor, is what was moved in front of the body. That motion is germane, and that is based upon the Department of Education's recommendation for this particular article. So the chair will rule the motion germane. The next part of your question, I think, is best directed towards the administration, if they so choose to be interrogated.
So we're looking at a document. It's a guidance document from the Agency of Education, December 18, 2018, with exactly this article as warned, and then they have a suggested motion, which is what was read, that essentially links the provision for payment to that statute, Title 16, that was read, which earlier I had also described that that's part of the long-standing practice of school districts following the generally accepted accounting principles in its review, in its preparation, in its recording of expenses, and then the internal control component of having a school board or a subcommittee review those expenditures before they're dispersed. So that is what was read. It is directly from the Agency of Ed. So in terms of authority, there's no question that this is coming from the oversight agency of the school boards.
Further discussion on Article 9 in the red, in the last row.
I'm Dale Morse. I'm from Guilford. And it appears to me that what we're doing is, as it says in number 9, we're trying to establish provisions for the payment of any expense incurred before the district becomes fully operational. And the way we're going to do that is by complying with this provision that the state has given us that refers to this procedure in the statute. So it's not like these two things are connected. Number 9 is saying we have to be able to pay things, and we want to say how we're going to do that. And the state has given us a way to do that in this provision. Is that correct? Okay. So I think we just have to vote on it. I would call the question.
That's correct. You've read Robert's rules. Is there further discussion? The motion on the floor right now is to call the question. It requires a 2/3 vote. So I will take a voice vote first. So all those in favor of ending debate, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say nay. Nay. The ayes appear to have it. Debate is now ended. We will call the question. The motion on the floor is that the Windham Southeast Unified Union School District comply with the provisions of 16 VSA Section 563, subdivisions 8 and 9, regarding the payments of expenses and the maintenance of financial accounts, and comply with the policies and procedures of the Windham Southeast Supervisory Union, the previous body, regarding such matters. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say nay. Nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. You have passed Article 9. We move on to Article 10, which is to authorize the district to borrow money pending receipt of payments from the State Education Fund by the issuance of its notes or orders payable not later than 1 year from date, provided, however, that the district is authorized by Vermont statutes to borrow sufficient funds to meet pending obligations. Is there a motion? Kim Price.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District have the power to borrow money pending receipt of payments from the State Education Fund by the issuance of its notes or orders payable not later than 1 year from date, provided, however, that the newly formed district is authorized by Vermont statutes to borrow sufficient funds to meet pending obligations.
Is there a second on the motion? It's been moved and seconded that the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District have the power to borrow money pending receipt of payments from the State Education Fund by the issuance of its notes or orders payable not later than 1 year from date, provided, however, that the newly formed district is authorized by Vermont statutes to borrow sufficient funds to meet pending obligations. Is there any discussion on the motion? Are you ready to call the question? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. You have passed Article 10. And we move on to the last remaining article, Article 11, to determine whether to authorize the Board of School Directors pursuant to the provisions of 16 VSA Section 563, subsection 10 and subsection 11C to provide mailed notice to residents of the availability of the annual reports and proposed school budget in lieu of distributing the annual report and proposed budget. I understand Christina Naylor has a motion.
I move that the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District authorize its Board of School Directors pursuant to the provisions of Section 16 VSA 563 Subpart 10 and 11C to provide mailed notice to residents of the availability of the annual report and proposed school budget in lieu of distributing the annual report and proposed budget.
Is there a second on the motion? It's been moved and seconded that the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District authorize its Board of School Directors pursuant to the provisions of 16 VSA Sections 563.10 and subsections 11C to provide mailed notice to residents of the availability of the annual report and proposed school budget in lieu of distributing the annual report and proposed budget. Is there discussion on the motion? Are you ready to call the question? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. You have passed Article 11. Before the chair entertains a motion to adjourn, I understand that a few people would like to make remarks. We'd recognize Jody Normandeau.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I had hoped to say this before the meeting, but I can say it now. I was elected as a school board member by the Dummerston voters to oversee the administration of the Dummerston School District and to see that all of our children receive an excellent education. I was not elected by the voters to close our school, sell it to another entity for $1, or take on another school district's debt. I also was not elected to oversee the state's creation of a multi-town school district. Any authority that I might have comes from the citizens of Dummerston. Having said this, I am here tonight as a representative of the Dummerston School Board on a transition committee. I am here tonight to help us move forward to do the best we can for all of our students and for our towns in the event that we end up being forced to merge. All of our towns voted overwhelmingly not to merge. Dummerston voted 5-1 against. However, at this point, we are being forced to merge by state agencies that have failed to recognize or respect our votes. I want this process to be run by this governance group of elected officials and not by state agencies or administrators. If we are eventually forced to go this route, we need to do it our way and make our own decisions. We can make changes in the default articles of agreement that will respect the wishes of each town, protect schools from closure, moving students around, closing middle schools, etc. Changes we were unable to make in the 706B study committee process. We can work together to identify the best way forward for all of our students. I am hopeful that the others on the transition committee will feel the same way and work together to these ends. Thank you.
Further new business. Before the chair entertains a motion to adjourn, do we have the numbers for tonight's meeting? I'd like to read those into the record.
Menu for midnight snack.
Thank you so much. The numbers for this evening's meeting: in the town of Brattleboro, out of 9,279 voters, 60 were in attendance for 0.65% of the voting population. The town of Dummerston had 1,613 voters registered. 19 were present for 1.18% of the voting populace. The town of Guilford, with its 1,736 registered voters, had 27 in attendance. And you take the, you're the winners tonight, Guilford, with 1.56% of the electorate, or of the voting populace. Putney, with its 1,836 voters, had 8 for 0.44%. For totals, out of the 14,459 registered voters in the district, 114 were in attendance for 0.79% of the voting population. Is there any further new business? Brattleboro was the first town I read. Out of the 9,279 voters, 60 were in attendance for 0.65%. Seeing no further new business, yes. Well, is there a second to the motion? All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The meeting is adjourned at 8:49 p.m. Thank you.